So I don't actually feel very experienced with lace making. So I was a bit unsure about making this video. But then I saw a completely unrelated video on a different subject, and the lady said, you don't have to have got all the way to Z yourself to be able to help somebody else get from A to B. And I thought that's brilliant in terms of crafts, because for many crafts, like, you never finish learning, like you never actually get to Z. But if you've already got past B, then you can help other people who are just starting out from the very beginning. So that's my intention. So please don't expect to learn how to do anything like this. But if you just want to learn the basics and see things done in slow motion, then I can help you with that, you know, with the basics and just learning enough to be able to make a very simple lace pattern. Be warned, there's going to be a lot of chat in this video, but I will put the times in the description below, so if you don't want to listen to all my chit chat, you can just skip ahead to the bits that are more interesting to you. So I'll be talking a bit about my own roller coaster journey with lace making to the point where I'm at now. I'll also be showing some examples of what I've already made, and I'll talk a bit about the basic equipment that you will need. And then finally we'll see how to wind thread onto the bobbins so that the thread doesn't fall off. and we'll see the basic stitches. If you're already feeling a bit overwhelmed at the thought of it, I'll just tell you there's just 2 basic moves that you need to learn, and then it's the combination of how you use those 2 moves. So, you know, it can be broken down to a very simple level, which is perfect for me. So even though I first tried bobbin lace making about 30 years ago, I still very much consider myself to be a beginner, because when I first tried, obviously YouTube wasn't around and I was trying to teach myself from books, and I very quickly got to a point where I couldn't progress any further and I lost all confidence. I always intended to come back to it, so I kept my supplies, excuse me, but it was many years before I came back to it again. And then I started again, and then again I quickly got to the point where I couldn't progress and I gave up again. So each time I restart, it's like I'm basically learning from scratch all over again, which is why, despite 30 years, I'm still a beginner. The previous time to this, when I restarted doing some lace, I made myself this little book. So I made the book, and the paper is actually, I tea-dyed the paper because I wanted it to look like it was an old lace making book, and I just kept a record of the basic moves, the basic stitches. There were some samples of bits that I'd made and descriptions of how to do it, because I thought, knowing myself, I'm going to get to a stage where I stop again. And I thought when I come back to it again, it will be easier for me to relearn it from reading the instructions in my own words rather than trying to go back to the original books. And of course now it's, you know, it's easier with being able to watch YouTube videos as well. But it's still nice to have those samples and instructions in my own words. So the little butterfly on the front is one of the few finished lace items I made. Well, I say finished, it's actually supposed to have some decoration inside the wings as well, but I didn't understand the instructions, so I just stuck with the outline, and then I stitched that onto the fabric before I covered the book. And apart from that, there are very few finished items I actually made. I made a couple of bookmarks. I'll show you those in a minute when we've got the camera looking down. So I was first introduced to lace when I met a lady who was visiting from Wales, I think, and her mother lived in the same town as me, and we got talking about hobbies and crafts, and she was obviously into doing bobbin lace. And the next time she came to visit, she lent me some of her lace making equipment so that I could give it a try before going and buying my own stuff. In reality, I think it was probably my parents that bought it initially, not me. I don't know, maybe I saved up pocket money, but probably my parents paid for it. And of course now with YouTube, there are people who have demonstrated how you can make some basic bobbin lace making equipment just from household items. So you don't actually need to invest any money to try it out. And because I've already got the equipment, you know, I've not done homemade bobbins or a homemade pillow. So what I'll do is I'll put a link in the description below to a video from someone else who shows a few different options for making pillows and bobbins. So if you want to give it a try without any financial commitment, then you can. So there are many different types of pillows, different shapes depending what type of lace is being made, and also I think probably regional differences as well. And obviously the traditional pillows are made of more natural materials, but the modern ones are kind of a dense foam or polystyrene often. And there are many different styles of bobbins too, and often these are regional differences that I think have developed over time based on the particular style of lace that's done in that area. And I think of the different types of lace as being a little bit like if somebody says, I like old oil paintings. There are, you know, if you look at art history, like how many different styles of painting have been done over the centuries using oil. So I kind of think of that with lace. The fundamentals of it are the same, but there are just different regional styles, or perhaps at different times in history there have been different styles, but the basics of it are the same. The main thing that you need to know about the bobbin, whatever shape is going on at the bottom end, whether there are beads or not, the key feature is the narrow neck here, because that's where the thread is wound, and it just needs to have some kind of bigger lump at the top, like the head, which as you're using it just stops the thread just unravelling off the top. So this is the key part, and anything else is just either just a regional style or decorative preference. So yeah, any kind of bobbin will work as long as you've got somewhere to wind the thread. And of course, aside from the pillow and the bobbins, two other key things you need are pins and the thread. And traditionally, I believe that the pins were brass so that they didn't rust. And I guess like nowadays, I mean, the pins I use are just stainless steel. And I'm not doing my lace anywhere that's damp, so I'm not worried about pins rusting. But I guess in the old days, where the ladies would sit outside their door to get better light for doing their lace, so they were kind of doing a lot of their lace making outside just for the sunlight. So I guess that's why, you know, perhaps they had issues with pins rusting and why they used brass pins. I don't know, I'm just guessing on that one. And then with the thread, basically any kind of thread can be used, but it just depends what scale you're doing your lace. So if you're doing, you know, really large scale lace, you could use a really thick thread, or if you're doing really fine, delicate lace, then obviously you want a thin thread. Most of mine is pretty thin, and I'll show you an example of you know, the same pattern that was done with two thicknesses of thread, and you can see the difference. But I'll show you that in a moment. Okay, so I think that's enough chat from me. Well, there'll still be more chat, but let's actually have a look at what's going on while I'm chatting. So this was the first bookmark I made, and if I recall, I made this at sort of like towards the end of my first stint of lace making, and it was after I'd done this that I then thought I couldn't progress any further, and I ended up giving up. What I should have done was I should have practiced and made more bookmarks to really kind of sink those skills into my mind. But anyway, this is the first bookmark I made, and then this is the paper pattern. So you can see it at the top, it's got kind of letters marked and it's got lines marked to show the direction. And in the book that I got this from, there were very detailed descriptions of each step, what to do. But when I got to the end, I didn't understand the instructions of how to finish it off, because you had all these threads hanging down. This particular one used 16 pairs of bobbins. So I get to this point, I've got 32 threads hanging down. How do I get them into a neat point? Well, I didn't understand the instructions, so I kind of basically just made something up myself, and it's a bit scruffy this end when you look at it close up. But overall, I was happy with it. And then this is the other bookmark that I've made. I did this one a couple of years ago when I restarted, and this one is much more complex in the design. And you can see from the pattern, there's lots going on with the zigzaggy lines, and there are loads of mistakes in this. I know there are mistakes, but one of the positive things about a more complex design is the mistakes don't stand out as much. Well, unless they're big mistakes, I guess. But for this one, I know there are mistakes, but at a quick glance, I can't see where they are. So that's good. But although this was a more complex design, it actually used less bobbins than this one. This one had 16 pairs of bobbins, whereas this one only had 12 pairs of bobbins. And I had the same issue at the bottom with not knowing how to kind of get that neatly to a point with all the threads. So that's something for me personally that I need to work on. I can't teach you how to do that bit yet. So these are the threads that I currently have. This one is what's left from the original batch of thread that I bought all those years ago. And then these ones came as a set. So these are all from the same company and the same thickness of thread, which is nice because if I want to do a multicoloured pattern, I know I can use any of these together and the thread is the exact same thickness. Whereas this one is slightly thicker. I'll show you a close-up to compare. So can you see the difference between these two samples? This one was done with that slightly thicker thread, and then this one was done with the thinner thread, and it's just not very stable. It's very easily pulled out of shape, whereas this one is much more secure, and it, you know, although you can flex it, it kind of bounces back to its proper shape. And they were both done using this pattern, same scale, but obviously this thicker weight of thread was better suited to this scale of pattern, whereas with the thinner thread I should have scaled down the pattern slightly so that it was more suitable. But that's something which I guess, well, I'm hoping will come with experience, that I'll be able to look at a pattern and think, oh, that scale is too big for the thread I've got, or that scale is too small for the thread I've got, and then increase or reduce the size of the pattern accordingly. But like I say, I've not got that level of experience yet, so hopefully that will come with time. And then on the subject of showing samples using the different threads, this is another piece that I made recently, using the roller that I added onto my pillow so that I could do a long strip. And obviously you can see we've got two colours here. So I used one pair of bobbins, was in this kind of corally, pinky, reddy sort of colour. And then the rest were just in the ivory. So that the one pair of bobbins just weaves back and forth across the hearts, whereas the cream does everything else. So that's kind of a little bit more involved, and This is the first sort of really successful time that I've used two colours. I did use two colours on this one as well, but the colours are so similar that it doesn't really stand out. I was going for a subtle look, but it ended up being a little bit more subtle than I actually intended. I hope you enjoyed hearing my story of how I got where I am today with my lace and looking at the samples of what I've made up until now. And I hope it's intrigued you enough that you'll watch the next video to see how to do the basic steps and maybe even give it a go yourself. I was originally planning to include the basic stitches at the end of this video, but I thought it made more sense to do the practical part of it separately, because that might be something that people only want to watch how to do it. Not everybody's going to be interested in looking at what I've already done or hearing about my stop-start journey on the lace making. So hopefully I will see you in the next video.